Hello, everybody. I don't know if you know who Jeff Bezos is, but Jeff Bezos is the founder of Amazon. And there is some incredible stories that come out of the first bunch of years of Amazon's existence from its original 10 to 12 employees. And one of those really curious stories is how hard it was for them to get Bezos to approve the hiring of people for even the smallest of jobs, secretary jobs, jobs to just work in a warehouse, stocking boxes full of books, because that's all Amazon was at its inception. It was selling books online. And Bezos said no to almost every candidate for some of these seemingly small jobs. And that's because Bezos had a very clear vision for what he wanted his company to be about. And so he wanted to hire people that would align with that vision. And these initial 10 to 12 employees, they laugh as they look back on it, because you would have thought that you were trying to hire for the CIA, how seriously Bezos took filling those positions. And yet they also look at it now today and think, boy, that was part of Jeff Bezos' genius, is he aligned the standards of what he wanted for his company with the standards of the people that were going to work for the company. And he did that through the use of the word no. And that's what we're going to talk about in our sixth and final session of our 2020 Vision series today. We're going to talk about the entire concept, not just using the word no, but the entire concept of intolerance, or never lowering your standards. We're going to look at Nehemiah chapter 13, where the wall has been completed, revival has sparked throughout the nation of Israel, and Nehemiah returns back to Babylon to resume his original position as cupbearer to the king. And then after some time, he's given permission to come back to Israel to check on the status of how the nation of Israel is doing. And what he finds incredible vision slippage. In essence, the nation of Israel had stopped saying no to a lot of the things that were getting in the way of their progress. And instead, they were saying yes to those things. And the vision and the stability of the country was beginning to become shaky because they stopped saying no. They lowered their standards and they tolerated things that were actually undermining the quality of their country. And so as we finish up this 6-part series on how to develop a God-ordained, God-glorifying vision for a particular role in your life, we want to close it out by really inspiring you to use the word no, to be intolerant of the slipping of your standards. You might notice the background behind me here. I'm actually in my home garage. I have, over the last bunch of years, been able to purchase equipment and turn half of my home garage into a pretty nice lifting space. And when I enter the door that's just behind the camera here, when I enter this door, close that door behind me, and spend as much time as I do here, 6 to 7 days a week, when I close that door, I am saying no to lots of things so that I can keep a high standard in a particular area of my life. I'm saying no to TV. I'm saying no to Netflix during this coronavirus time. I'm spending more time than I'm used to watching Netflix. I'm saying no to social media. I'm saying no to the ping of emails coming in. I'm saying no to lots of things so that I can keep my standards high in here. So I thought this was a great space to finish out our 2020 Vision series together. Let's look real quick at two things. The first thing we're going to look at is how standards begin to slip. And these are some things you can evaluate in your life as you're thinking about different roles in your life where you'd like to have a God-ordained, God-glorifying vision. There is ways you can evaluate if your standards are beginning to slip. Are you beginning to become too tolerant of things, saying yes to too many things, not saying no to enough things? And then we're also going to look at how to hold on to the rope. And I'll talk to you about that concept in just a second. what I want to get you to understand real fast is that there is fuel, if you will, to developing really high standards and saying no to all sorts of things that could get in the way of your vision. The first fuel is what we call general beliefs. These would be non-negotiable, biblically based, Christ-like character matters. So for example, one of the things that would bond us all together as disciples of Jesus Christ is we have a pretty clear understanding that lying is unacceptable. We say no to lying. That would be a general belief that fuels our ability to say no to dishonesty. And then the second fuel to your ability to say no, because no's hard. No requires willpower. No requires boldness. No is hard. And so you need to understand what fuels your ability, what strengthens your ability, what gives you kind of the guts to say no to certain things. The second thing is specific beliefs. And these would be beliefs that you hold to that are specific to your vision. Chick-fil-A not being open on Sundays is a great example of a specific belief specific to their vision for the type of company that they want to be. Another way to look at this would be through John Maxwell's concept of the law of trade-offs. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to other things. But one of the ways to look at it is every time you say no to something, you're actually saying yes to other things. So you want to say no to things that get in the way of your vision. So then in essence, you are saying yes to all the things. You're giving yourself the bandwidth, if you will. When you say no to this, you're reserving room in your life to focus your energies on things that will actually add value to the vision that you're developing. Our core verse today comes out of Nehemiah 13:8. Nehemiah returns, like I said, and finds Israel saying yes to everything and undermining the vision that they had begun to really hold on to establish their resurgence. And in Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 8, Nehemiah returns and he says, "It was very displeasing to me." You see, Nehemiah knew exactly what no needed to be said to, and he understood that Israel was saying yes to way too many things. Let's look at a couple things that could be an indication that standards are slipping for a particular vision in your life. First of all, and here's a blank for you if you're using your note sheets, choice of companions can be evidence that your standards are slipping. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 7 tells us that Nehemiah learned about the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah. Eliashib was a priest that he had done for Tobiah by preparing a room for him in the courts of the house of God. You see, Eliashib had said yes to allowing Tobiah to take up residence in the temple, something that was only reserved for priests, for high priests. And as a result, he said yes, the standards begun to slip. Now, why in the world would Eliashib not only violate that standard, but do it trying to help out someone who had a history of trying to undermine everything that Israel was trying to do? You see, Eliashib had a poor choice of companion, and it was evidence that standards were beginning to slip. Here's your next blank, evidence that your standards are slipping. Your use of compensation. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 10 tells us that Nehemiah discovered that the portions of the Levites had not been given to them. There was things, resources, food and money and clothes that were to be reserved for the Levites, which were the priests, and they were no longer being reserved. And it says in verse 10, so that the Levites and the singers who performed the service had gone away, each to his own field. You see, Israel was no longer using its compensation in a way that glorified God. They were saying yes to all sorts of other things. And as a result, they were saying no to the priority of funding the temple, which was the spiritual epicenter of their community. I'd encourage you, when it comes to your finances and your choice of compensation, this is a very simple concept that was given to me maybe 10, 12 years ago. And let me tell you something, it has never failed me. I'd encourage you, from the time you get your first job, through every promotion you ever receive, you get your dream job someday, whatever it might be, manage your finances according to the 10-10-80 concept. The first thing you do once you receive your paycheck is tithe 10%. That's just the first thing to do. Automatic default, just say no to everything else so you can say yes to tithing 10%. The next 10% should immediately go in a savings account. Make that an automatic habit. Say no to everything else, all the other distractions, and say yes to tithing 10%, saving 10%, and then the remaining 80%, live on that. If you will begin that habit with your very first part-time job and hold on to that habit through every financial decision, every car you purchase, every house you purchase, every promotion you get, every annual increase you get, every bonus you get, if you will manage your finances according to that, if you will say yes to that and say no to everything else, you will almost always be in a stable financial position. Here's your next blank. Evidence that standards are slipping and you're saying yes to too much and you're not saying no enough would be a lack of conviction. I love this one. Because conviction is big time fuel for knowing what to say no to. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 14, Nehemiah is talking to God out loud and he says, God, remember me for what I am doing. Because Nehemiah is going about now, kind of rattling everyone's cages, trying to pull the reins in, get everyone to shape up and start saying no to all these things they were saying yes to so that they could say yes to the greatness of their country. Nehemiah asked the Lord to remember him for all this hard work of saying no that he's trying to lead the people of Israel in doing. And he says, and do not blot out my loyal deeds, which I have performed for the house of God. You see, Nehemiah had a deep conviction that what he was saying no to was ultimately so they could say yes to the priorities of God. So I love superhero movies. It's one of the ways I think I decompress mentally. I just watch these fantastic movies that are almost, full-blown sci-fi, the Avenger movies, all this kind of stuff. There's a great line where in the first Avenger movie, where I believe it's Agent Smith is laying on the ground. He's just been stabbed and is slowly dying as he's facing kind of the arch enemy of that movie, Loki. And he looks at Loki as Loki's lording over him as Agent Smith is dying at Loki's feet. And Loki's kind of like bragging, sticking it in his face. And Agent Smith looks up to him and he says, you know that you will lose, right? And Loki says, how do you figure that? Like, we have got you cornered. You're scattering everywhere. We have more troops than you. Like it's over. You're done for. Agent Smith says you will lose because you lack conviction. Man, I love that line. And when we lack conviction about our vision, we will stop saying no to important things that we should be saying no to. Here's your final evidence, if you will, barometer, if you will, that standards are slipping in your vision. You begin to bend to the culture. In Nehemiah 13, verse 16, and then verses 23 to 24, Nehemiah describes all these things that the people of Israel were doing that was bending to the culture of their modern times. And it was in direct conflict with the standards that had been laid out for the vision for the greatness of their country. You see, they were bending to the culture. We live in a very, very influential culture, mostly because we're so hyper connected to it all the time. Every social media post, we all have multiple social media accounts. I just read today that there's something like 3 billion active users of Facebook every single day. And so through the advent of social media and the internet, we are constantly seeing what the culture is saying, what the culture believes is true or not true. And if we're not careful, we will bend towards the culture and end up saying yes to the culture and saying no to important things about the vision that God has for our lives. Let's talk real quick, 3 points on how to hold on to the rope. There's a great book written by John Calipari. He is the head men's basketball coach at the University of Kentucky, won a national championship a bunch of years ago. He's in the Basketball Hall of Fame. He's a tremendous coach. He's a very, very big personality. I read his book, Players First, and it's really a book depicting his entire philosophy on his guys over all his years of coaching, 30 plus years coaching college basketball now. It's a tremendous book. It really raised my respect for John Calipari. And in it, he says one of the most important things you have to teach your players is to never let go of the rope, to never give in, to never let your standards slip, to say no to anything that would entice you to let go of the rope. I love that line. Never let go of the rope. Here's 3 ways that you can make sure that you do not lower your standards. You can make sure you're saying no to all the things that would entice you to lower your standards. And in essence, never let go of the rope. Here's the first one, and it's the next blank for you. Honest evaluation. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 17, Nehemiah confronts the people and says, "What is this evil thing you are doing?" Who's the Nehemiah in your life that could challenge you and say, yo, time out. Are you nuts? I think that's an important thing. We need to have those people in our life. We need to not dodge those people in our lives. In fact, when we're sensing the urge to dodge those people, we should go lean in directly with them and ask them hard questions about ourselves. If you're going to hold on to the rope and keep your standards high, you need to have ways to honestly evaluate yourself. Here's your next blank on how to hold on to the rope. You need courageous conviction. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 21. Nehemiah was so convinced that the standards were slipping that he was emboldened, and he told them, the people of Israel, that if you don't straighten this up, if you don't stop saying yes to all these cultural things, start saying no to them, I will use force against you. Meaning Nehemiah knew exactly how to use the authority of the government to hold the people accountable to do what it is that they said they were going to do. That takes a lot of boldness. It takes a lot of courage. Conviction fuels courage, and that puts you in a position to being able to boldly say no to anything that would entice you to lower your standards. Here's the third and final evidence that you can do to hold on to the rope. Constant attention. In Nehemiah chapter 16 and in chapter 13, in chapter 13, there is 16 verses where Nehemiah says, I, and then an action verb is followed. 16 verses. You see, Nehemiah understood that the vision, if it was going to be maintained, if the standards were going to be held high, it required constant attention, constant active attention. The word I followed by an action verb 16 times in Nehemiah chapter 13. Your vision will never go on autopilot. You will always have to be leaning into it and be okay with that. That is the nature of holding up something high. It requires constant attention. Let me close out our 2020 Vision series with this story. If you're probably familiar with the name Beethoven, one of the greatest composers to ever live. You're probably familiar with the fact that Beethoven went almost 100% deaf over the course of his musical career. And there is this incredible thing that Beethoven wrote when his hearing had officially gone. Like it was at a new level of, of deafness in his life. And he writes in it, listen to this, what he says. He says, I will take fate by the throat. It is beautiful to live. I am not made for a quiet life. That was a letter that Beethoven wrote after completely losing his hearing. He wrote that letter to a friend, and then Beethoven would go on to write some of his best known symphonies after that. You see, Beethoven had a vision for his life, and he was not going to allow his physical impairments to lower his standards for that vision. Listen, I love this entire topic over the last 6 series. I think thinking through a vision for a specific role in your life is an important thing for your life, for your relationship with Jesus Christ, for your marriage someday, for your parenting someday, for the type of community leader you want to be someday, for the type of church member you want to be someday. Really, I want to challenge you to keep going back to these 6 sessions, review some of these concepts, and hold on to just a piece of information here, just an idea here, just a quote there, just a verse there, as you are constantly attending to the vision for your life. I'll close with this, Ephesians 3:20. We are told that God has put inside of us power to do more than we could ever ask or think according to his will. I don't know exactly what the vision is for your life, but I do know that inside of you is the power to pursue a vision that would be God-ordained and would glorify God at a level far beyond what it is you could imagine. God bless. Have a great day, everybody.